Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Zeke-ollege Football. I'm your host, as always, Zeke. This is part two of a two-part series where I am going to put the teams in tier lists entirely, totally subjectively on how much I like them. This is so I can be absolutely transparent, and there is no calls of, oh, he doesn't like this team, he's just showing favoritism. Yeah, I mean, college football is a very subjective sport. Every team means something to someone. So this is my way of sort of airing out all the dirty laundry, saying these are my opinions on these teams. So if I say something and you guys know I don't like a team, I must really mean it, and so on and so forth. All right, so last time, if you didn't watch part one, go ahead and watch that one. This one can wait, and you can come back to this. But last time I left off at Kentucky, so we're gonna move forward and start off part two with the Liberty Flames. Now, I like Jamie Chadwell a lot as a coach. I liked him a lot more at Coastal Carolina. Not the hugest fan of Liberty. Their color scheme, their uniforms are a little boring to me. Um, but I like some of the pieces that they have. Keaton Salter is a very, very good player. I'm I'm gonna lean a little bit more towards the dislike category with them. Just not a huge fan of the school in general. Um, for Louisiana, the Ragin' Cajuns. First things first, I love the name Ragin' Cajuns. It is it's so fun. It's just so fun. Um, that being said, as a team, especially this year, they don't really they don't really do anything for me. I don't hate them. I'm not gonna actively root against them, but I'm not gonna root for them. Really either. Louisiana Monroe. Uh, I mean, I what can you say about Louisiana Monroe? Like they're a true underdog story. Actually, you know what? You know what? Recent news. I don't know if I broke this on my channel yet, but I'm gonna actually move ULM up to the mediocre tier because they got a quarterback transfer from Oklahoma, first team all name type player, General Booty, transferring in, most likely going to be the starter. So, yeah, actually, I will root for ULM because of General Booty. What a name. Uh, let's move forward. Louisiana Tech. Not a huge Louisiana Tech fan. Um, so gonna put them in the dislike category. I don't really care about Louisiana Tech. Um, Louisville. I do not like Louisville. Um, again, Cardinals, I don't like that as a mascot. Their color scheme doesn't really do much for me. Their uniforms aren't really all that special. Um, and they tend to gather together a lot of players that I just don't care about. Um, last year it was Plummer, the quarterback. I don't really care about him. And then this year, it's another team, another quarterback that I just don't care about. Tyler Shuck, he's been around for seemingly forever, and uh, I don't care. Like with all due respect, um, so Louisville, I just don't like them. I just don't like them. LSU. LSU is a team that I do like. I like their uniforms a lot. They produce a lot of good players, players that I'm interested in watching. Uh, I'm interested in seeing how Garrett Nussmeier uh, does with the starting role. Um, I liked Jaden Daniels and a lot of the pieces around him. I like Joe Burrow and the pieces around him, obviously. Um, And then even going back, I liked Leonard Fournette. I even, would root for Zach Mettenberger back in the day. I don't know. I find myself partial to LSU. They produce a lot of players that I quite enjoy watching. The Marshall Thundering Herd. I'm gonna I'm gonna put Marshall in the dislike category, not the hate, not the strongly dislike, just the dislike category. I don't have much of an opinion on Marshall. They've had players that I like in the past. I'm not a huge fan of the color green, um, and that features pretty heavily in Marshall's brand. I do like the fact that they have a nice storyline going. Cole Pennington, son of Chad Pennington, he's going to be the starting quarterback there. Or if he's not starting, he's going to be on the roster, potentially getting some snaps. So it's interesting to see that as a storyline that plays out. But I don't have much of a opinion on Marshall to feel very strongly about liking them. Maryland. I'm gonna put Maryland in the mediocre tier. They they have some an offensive identity that I enjoy. I like Mike Locksley as a coach. That being said, I don't like the Maryland flag. So for anyone watching from Maryland, I'm sorry. I'm not a huge fan of the flag, and the flag is integral to the branding of the Terps. So that's sort of where I'm at. I like some of their pieces. I don't like some of their pieces. And it's going to be interesting to see how they move on from Talia Tagovailoa as well. The Memphis Tigers. I'm putting Memphis squarely in the mediocre tier. They are my least favorite Tiger team. Um, you know, just based on color scheme, uniforms. Uh, I like tigers a lot as a mascot. I think that's pretty cool. I know it's a pretty commonly used mascot, but uh, I just like them. Uh, but yeah, Memphis, good, not great, so just mediocre. Miami, Florida. Let me add that caveat. There we go. Miami, Florida. I like them. Uh, again, they have a lot of pieces that they brought in that I quite like. I like Damian Martinez coming over from Oregon State. I like Cam Ward. It's really interesting to see how they find a way to lose. But I liked a lot of looking back, I watched some of the 2001 Miami Hurricane team, and deep down, I'm not, I wouldn't die for it, but I wouldn't mind seeing Miami see some success in terms of football success again, because their fans have really had to deal with some heartbreakers. Next up, I don't even have to look at it. I know it's Miami of Ohio. I'm gonna put them in the dislike category. Um, the team itself, I don't really like at all. The only thing that's keeping them out of the strongly dislike category is I like their quarterback, Brett Gabbert, younger brother of Blaine Gabbert. He is, again, the only reason why they are not in the strongly dislike category. Michigan, the Michigan Wolverines. I like Michigan. Uh, they're a team that has a bunch of memories for me, mainly because they are the alma mater. of my favorite player growing up, Tom Brady. I used to always, be like, oh, I want to be like Tom Brady. So my folks thought I was going to go to Michigan. And then I was like, well, actually, no, I don't feel like going that far away. But Michigan, I like them. Their uniforms are a lot better when they have yellow pants, or the maize is what they call that shade of yellow. I'm not a huge fan of the blue jerseys and blue pants, the unitard look. But you know, Michigan, I overall do like. Michigan State, I like Michigan State uh, more than I like Michigan. I really like the Spartans as a mascot. Um, I know I said I wasn't the hugest fan of green. Still not the hugest fan of green, but Michigan State tends to do it pretty well. Only one exception. If they wear those god-awful neon green state uniforms where it just says state in big letters and like slime green, I will root against them for that one game. But other than that, I usually root towards Michigan State and what they do. Also, especially for this upcoming season, I like Jonathan Smith. I like what he seems to be building. Wish he left Oregon State on better terms, but in the meantime, Michigan State up in the strongly like category. Middle Tennessee. I'm gonna throw Middle Tennessee down here in the dislike category. They just don't occupy any space in my mind, so I don't like them. There isn't really many pieces there where I'm like, oh my gosh, yeah, that Middle Tennessee player. No. Um, and there are plenty of Conference USA teams that I'd root for over them. Minnesota, the Golden Gophers. I'm gonna throw them in the mediocre tier. So for me, Minnesota is a run-heavy team. Um, and I like the run. Uh, I'm a big fan of power run games. Um, you know, like I said earlier, I watched a lot of Leonard Fournette, so I do like a good power run game. Uh, but they are just a pretty tough team to watch on offense sometimes because for most run heavy teams, they can still throw the ball as a change of pace, but they prefer to run, like Michigan. Minnesota, they don't really ever have that passing option nearly as well. They had Tanner Morgan back in the day, but you know, he was constantly injured. They went to Athen Kaliakmanis. He's now over at Rutgers, so not really high on Minnesota, and I don't have much of a preference towards Minnesota, but I'll root for them over teams in the bottom half of the list. Mississippi State. Uh, so I'm not the hugest Mississippi State fan, um, but I don't dislike them. I'm not optimistic for them next year. I don't think they'll have a good season, but I feel sort of bad for them a little bit. They have them and a couple other teams have what I call younger brother syndrome, where they're seemingly overshadowed by another team in their state that's seemingly, you know, the one that gets all the attention. Um, so I tend to root for teams that have that sort of if that sort of issue. But yeah, Mississippi State's probably towards the lower end of the teams that I would root for in that category. Um, let's see, Missouri. Missouri. Uh, I strongly like Missouri. They play in my favorite conference, the SEC. They have a great color scheme, black and gold. For a while there, my uncle was stationed out in Missouri, so that's when I started to become a fan of them. And I have endured being a Mizzou fan for upwards of 10 years now. I'm going on 11 years of being a fan, so it should be no surprise. Yeah, I like Missouri. Navy, the Navy midshipmen. Much like the other two service academies, I don't really care all that much about Navy football. Um, it's interesting to see the triple option still in effect. That being said, Navy is probably on the lower end of the teams, uh, at least for service academies, in terms of my preference for them. Let's see. NC State. Uh, I like NC State this year. I didn't care for them as much before, but they brought in one of my favorite players in college football right now, Grayson McCall. So uh, I like NC State coming up this year, and I will be rooting for them a lot more. Let's see, Nebraska. Not a huge fan of their uniforms. White helmets just irk me. The white and red, I think, is quite boring. And on top of that, uh, they were once a storied program, but I just I feel like there's so little to talk about for Nebraska for this entire millennium, really. Um, all of their accomplishments, everything that they bring up for the most part is before the year 2000. Sometimes they'll bring up 2001, but I'm not a huge fan of Nebraska. Don't really like the Cornhuskers as a mascot, and it was pretty entertaining to watch Nebraska lose to Northwestern to start the 2022 season, to lose a bunch of one-score games in 2021, and I do like the direction that they're in. I like Matt Rule as a coach. I'm glad they got a quarterback of the future. I just don't like Nebraska. Um, Nevada. Nevada's gonna go into the mediocre category. They were pretty good a couple of years ago, when they had Carson Strong, and I liked them a lot more then. A lot of my favorite pieces left. Jay Norvell, notably coaching Colorado State now. They did bring over Brock Purdy's younger brother, Chubba Purdy, to compete for that job. I, it's a good story. I'm putting them in the mediocre tier. I, I just find myself with a lot more Mountain West teams that I'd rather root for than Nevada, such as New Mexico. Now, this is the New Mexico Lobos. I think that they're an interesting team. I don't hear a lot of people talk about them at all. Also, football in New Mexico is not usually very good, and I have some folks who live out in New Mexico, so I have that personal connection to that state. So I would root for University of New Mexico, and then um, the team that I really root for um, from that category is New Mexico State. I like the Aggies a lot. They're probably in for a rough season after Jerry Kill had to medically retire again. But yeah, New Mexico State in the strongly like, and New Mexico only in the like category. North Carolina. So for North Carolina, we're gonna put that in the like category. I like I like their powder blues. They've had a history of a couple good quarterbacks in a row, including Patriots 2024 draft pick Drake May. Seems like a nice guy. Sam Howell, who I also quite liked watching play. Um, and then there was like a year or so, and then before that, Mitch Trubisky, which Bears fans don't talk about. Um, yeah, North Carolina, no harm, no foul. I we'll get further on to explain why I don't have them up higher, but I overall like North Carolina. North Texas. North Texas. Again, not a huge fan of the color green. They haven't really had anything notable. They play in probably my least favorite conference right now, the American Conference. Uh, they have done one thing that's funny, and that is print out mugs with their school's initials on it. So UNT. Go ahead and look up North Texas mug to find out what I mean. Uh, but yeah, North Texas, not really anything notable other than they had Austin Aune as their quarterback a couple years back, and he was like 29. So don't really think about North Texas all that much. Don't really care about them either. Northern Illinois. So I I'm gonna put Northern Illinois uh into the dislike category. I think of them more akin to uh a team that's very up and down. Um, I don't know. Not a huge Northern Illinois guy. Let's move forward. Northwestern. Uh, so we're gonna throw Northwestern into that mediocre tier. I like the color purple. Not a huge fan of some of the Northwestern uniforms. They recently got redesigned though. I like the fact that they're going to be playing right by a lake, and they have a good story, but there's just not really much there where I'm like, oh my gosh, I need to root for Northwestern. Um, Notre Dame. I'm gonna throw Notre Dame into the middle category. It's a team where I'm like, okay, I'll root for Notre Dame against certain opponents, but I'll root against Notre Dame for other opponents as well. So it really depends. They're very much a 50-50 team for me. Ohio. Um, Not a huge fan of the Ohio Bobcats. Again, go back, not a huge fan of the color green. Uh, just doesn't do it for me. The Bobcats are all right, they're fine, but again, not really my speed. Yep. And Ohio State, I strongly dislike Ohio State to the point where I actually might make another category. There we go. That represents it right there. So Ohio State, I despise. I will root for legitimately any other team very strongly against Ohio State. Their fans, at least in my eyes, from what I've seen, extremely pretentious. Um, the fact that they censor themselves and don't even use the letter M because that's a Michigan letter. I mean, come on, what are we doing, guys? Grow up. Uh, they also were very adamant about saying the Ohio State University. It's also extremely pretentious. I hate Ohio State. No qualms about it. They have produced players that I Like that being said, God, I hate the school. Actually, one of my favorite players came out of Ohio State. Uh, Orlando Pace, offensive tackle for the Rams back in the day. Um, but yeah, I hate Ohio State, and that doesn't change. Moving forward, Oklahoma. I'm gonna throw Oklahoma into the strongly disliked category. Part of this goes to the fact that they've been pretty good and have pretty boring uniforms. Uh, Another part of it is also uh, my next pick because strongly like Oklahoma State. Uh, Black and orange is probably my favorite color combination. I think their uniforms look spectacular. They have a good mix of different uniform combinations. I like Ollie Gordon a lot. I like Mike Gundy as a coach a lot. Come after me. I'm a man. I'm 40 is an all-time quote. Love him for that. Um, I'm not a huge fan of Alan Bowman as a quarterback. I want them to try out other quarterbacks because I just don't think he's very good. But that being said, I will root for Oklahoma State against almost any other team. Old Dominion. Okay, Old Dominion. They have good uniforms for the most part. Powder blue, navy blue combination. They tend to wear white helmets a lot, which is a big knock on them. Uh, one of my cousins goes to Old Dominions. That sort of boosts them up, lands them right there in that middle ground, that mediocre tier. Ole Miss. Um, yeah, I find myself liking Ole Miss um more than more than Mississippi State because I like some of the players that they have on their roster. Um, I like Jackson Dart as a quarterback. I like the job that Lane Kiffin's doing, and they have overall good uniforms. So Ole Miss gets a little thumbs up in my book. Oregon, the Oregon Ducks. I like Oregon. I don't love Oregon. I find that I like how many uniform combinations they have. They certainly switch up their look a lot, and I like that they're not stagnant with it. On the flip side, some of their uniforms look extremely ugly, in my personal opinion. They sort of look like how a fifth grade boy would dress himself with the highlighter yellows and all of that. And I know I'm gonna get a lot of flack, in my opinion, but that's that's what this is. This is an entirely subjective list. But I really like Oregon State. Again, similar reason why I like Oklahoma State, Oreg State, uh, black and orange, great color combination. I quite like it. Um, and they both in a way sort of play that little brother role that I mentioned earlier um, to Oregon and Oklahoma respectively. I like teams that feel like an underdog, and especially uh, this upcoming year, Oregon State does really feel like an underdog to me. Penn State. I'm gonna throw Penn State into this dislike tier. Uh, they're not. I don't dislike them as much as I dislike some of these other teams, but I certainly wouldn't go out of my way to root for Penn State. Again, uniforms are pretty boring. Beaver Stadium, pretty cool atmosphere. I like the whiteouts, or the whiteouts of the stadium. I do wish they had a little bit more to offer in terms of players that I like right now, but they just don't have that. Pitt, the Pitt Panthers. Pitt's gonna go in the like category. Their color scheme is great. They don't have, again, players that I really care about this year, but more often than not, I find myself rooting for Pitt more than I'm rooting against Pitt. So that's why they're getting thrown in that like category. Moving forward, Purdue. Purdue University, I'm going to throw them in the mediocre tier. Um, Again, uniform wise, little bland. They need a rebrand, um, and they need one soon. That being said, Hudson Card, good quarterback. And then I also have some personal reasons why Purdue will be in the mediocre tier. I probably would have them lower usually, but because of some personal reasons, like I said, I am moving them up a tier. Rice University. I find myself disliking Rice. Um, it's going to be interesting. They have a cool quarterback competition going on between EJ Warner and AJ Padgett, the incumbent starter. But their color scheme of navy and gray just doesn't really do anything for me. Their nickname or just their name in general is Rice. If you think about a meal that you can eat that is boring and flavorless, it's plain white rice. And that's sort of my opinion on the university as well. I know it's named after a person whose last name was Rice. They're not named after the food, but you still think of the food, don't you? Rutgers. Rutgers is from New Jersey. Moving on. Sam Houston. Sam Houston, I find myself liking. Uh, so they're one of the newer FBS teams. Um, Again, I like their color scheme a lot. Um, they spell Bearcats funny. They spell Bearcats with a K, which I think is pretty cool. Um, yeah, I find myself rooting for Sam Houston. San Diego State. So I'm gonna throw San Diego State into that mediocre tier, and San Jose State will go into the like category. Um, right now it's just based on pieces. I don't like the pieces San Diego State has as much, and I like San Jose State's uniforms a lot more. Also, I watched uh, a couple Twitch channels back in the day. Um, who were playing San Jose State Dynasty mode on NCAA Football 14. So big shout outs to 49er George and Hindsight Grim uh, because they made me appreciate San Jose State more. Also, again, I like Spartans a lot as a team mascot. Next, we have SMU, the Mustangs. Probably going to throw them into the dislike category. I don't really find myself caring about SMU. Uh, and they're going to be in the ACC, and there's a lot more teams in the ACC that I like over SMU. So I'm going to throw them in the dislike category as we move into the South part of it. So starting with South Alabama. Hmm, South Alabama. Down. Alabama's going to go in the mediocre tier. Their initials abbreviate out to USA, and their colors are red, white, and blue. Good old American University, if you will. So that's mostly it. I don't really have that many other thoughts on South Alabama at this current moment. South Carolina, on the other hand, I will also throw into the mediocre tier. Um, I like them more now that they don't have Spencer Rattler. Shane Beamer seems like a cool guy, but out of teams in the SEC, I have some history dating back to 2013 when they beat my Missouri Tigers and really ruined what could have been an even better season. So, thanks, South Carolina. Anyway, moving forward, South Florida. Most of what you see about South Florida is one of two things. You either see discussion on uh, their slime time neon green uniforms, or you see them wearing all greens. I don't like either one of those. I just don't really like South Florida all that much. I don't like their logo. I don't like their mascot, the Bulls. So they're gonna go into that strongly dislike category for me. Southern Miss. I like Southern Miss. Again, I like their uniforms a lot. Good color scheme. They used to be higher up, but now that they don't have Frank Gore Jr., uh, I like them a little bit less. But yeah, Southern Miss, big old thumbs up. I wish the best for that program. Stanford, again, pretty boring uniforms. Don't really have much of a preference for anyone on the team right now. I guess I like the play of Alec Manor, but other than that, don't really care about them. Syracuse, I do like. Um, I like what Fran Brown is building over there, and I wish Syracuse the best. Good color scheme. I like the dome. I don't know. Syracuse seems pretty neat. TCU, the Horned Frogs are decidedly mediocre in my eyes. Um, I like the color purple. Uh, I liked I liked it a lot better when they don't use red with it. I don't think purple and red go well together. Um, I think that the spikes around the collar don't really look that good either. Um, so TCU, no thank you. Temple. Um, Again, when they lose players that I was interested in their program for, I tend to sort of shift um, into disliking the team a little bit more. And Temple, I liked EJ Warner, and he is no longer there. So uh, now I don't hate Temple, but they don't really fill out Lincoln Financial Field. I wish there was more uh, of a presence around the program. The Tennessee Volunteers. Yeah, I dislike Tennessee. Vol fans have been very vocal. Um, they had one good season and they would not stop talking about it. Um, and they were convinced that they were going to boat race every single team that they faced, and then were very upset when they got boat raced. So Tennessee, I like the checkered Neyland, but they're gonna go in my dislike category. The Texas Longhorns. Um, I find myself rooting for Texas, especially over Oklahoma. Um, whether or not Texas is back or not, um, their uniforms are classic. They've been a part of huge college football moments. I find myself liking Texas. Texas A&M. They're gonna go in that mediocre tier for me. Actually, you know what? Dropping them down. Texas A&M gonna go into the dislike category. I just don't like them all that much. I know that Jimbo's no longer there, but they just have an error. The cult around their program, I'm not a huge fan of. Um, Texas State, however, I do quite like. Uh, I like GJ Kinney as a coach. I like what they're building over there. Um, when I was doing a dynasty mode in NCAA 14, one of the schools that I bounced around to was Texas State, trying to build them up. Um, so good for them. Texas Tech. Uh, there are just other teams that I like more than Texas Tech. So they're going to go into that mediocre tier for me. Now, next up, Toledo. I have a fun story with this one. So when I turned on a random Mac game back in 2020, I was watching this game with my brother, and he's not a huge college football fan like I am, or like I assume people watching this video are. Um, so I told him, hey, you don't have to like all of college football, just pick a team to root for. And it was Toledo versus Western Michigan. Now, that actually turned out to be a really good game. It had a fake spike at the end anyway. Uh, but he chose Toledo. And I was like, any reason why you chose Toledo? And he was like, it's because Toledo has my heart. And you know what? Who am I to argue with that? So I like Toledo a lot. I like the blue and the yellow combination. I like the Rockets as a uh, as a team name. Their mascot looks pretty cool. And I like the fact that as part of their rivalry with Bowling Green, they have an actual rocket that is pointed and angled so that it would, if it was launched, it would land directly at midfield for Bowling Green's field. I think that's just a neat touch. So yeah, I like Toledo, and I root for Toledo. Troy, the Troy Trojans, are going to get a like in my book. I like the Trojans as well as a mascot. So Spartans and Trojans both get a cool thumbs up from me. And I like the name the Troy Trojans. I know it sounds kind of dumb sometimes, but Troy Trojans sounds it's just fun to say. Tulane. Actually for this upcoming season, I like Tulane a lot. Um, you know, I I found myself uh, their uniforms I feel like are a little overrated, but I'm interested to see how Ty Thompson does. And I like some of the pieces that they added in the portal. So, uh, I'm rooting for Tulane. Um, and I hope they do well. Let's see. Tulsa. I don't really, I don't, I just don't think about Tulsa very often or at all. Um, so there's no reason for me to like them or anything to move it up to mediocre tier either. UAB. I don't like UAB. That's nothing against Trent Dilfer as a coach. Nothing against any of the players. I think that their uniforms aren't great. And they have one of the most hideous alternate uniforms I've ever seen in my life. The gray with the neon looks horrendous, and whoever was in charge of making that decision should be fired. So yeah, UAB gonna be in that strongly dislike category. Moving on. UCF. UCF is a team that I will root for sometimes, not root for sometimes. I like Gus Malzahn as a coach. I like the Gus Bus, but UCF, are all right. UCLA. I like UCLA. Um, um, my good friend Trevor, he is a huge UCLA fan. So he's part of the reason why I like them, but I also just like them because they have really good uniforms. They're part of classic rivalries. They're synonymous with West Coast football. So yeah, I find myself rooting for UCLA. UConn. UConn, I'm gonna throw in that mediocre tier. Um, they just don't really do much, at least in football. Um, and they are rivals with teams that I actually root for. So UConn, squarely right there in that middle tier. UMass, you got me. I like UMass. I do. Again, Boston boy, Massachusetts boy. I root for UMass. They're a perennial underdog. I did a UMass rebuild with head coach Lon Dart. Shout out Derek Church. Shout out Trent Johnson for being the best QB wide receiver duo, helping us win multiple championships. But yeah, UMass. I have friends who go there. There's a lot to like about UMass, but who am I kidding? You root for UMass because anytime they win, it's like a huge upset. Oh, let's touch on UNLV. UNLV gonna go into that mediocre tier. Um, they're all right. Um, their uniforms are okay. They just don't really have much in a way that I really care about as much. But I don't hate them either. USC. I like USC. They've had a bunch of players who I really like: Reggie Bush, Carson Palmer, Matt Leinart. Recently, I like Caleb Williams. Even, you know, going back to like Marcus Allen, they're just so synonymous with West Coast college football, and their rivalry game with UCLA is one of the prettiest looking rivalry games in terms of uniform matchups that you'll ever see. So USC, I strongly like. Okay. UTEP. Uh, I like UTEP and I also like UTSA. I get that they're rivals, but for me, the blue and the orange are both really great for both teams. I think I like UTEP's shade a little bit more than UTSA's shade. Um, but UTSA tends to have the good looking shoulder design. So there's stuff to like with both of those teams there. Um, moving on, the Utah Utes. I'm gonna put them in the mediocre category. Again, I like some of their players. I like Cam Rising, but there's just too many teams in the Big 12 that I'd rather root for over Utah. Um, Utah State. I dislike. Um, just very boring uniforms. Nothing to write home about, nothing to really uh care about there. Vanderbilt. It's hard not to root for Vandy, but um they just don't really have much, and they've never seemingly had much. Um, I hope that they beat other teams on their schedule, but I just hope that they lose to Missouri every year. UVA, uh, Virginia, another team that I strongly like. Another one of my mom's alma maters. That's the reason why I can't put North Carolina up higher. Huge rivalry between these two schools. Um, and then Virginia Tech. I have a good friend who goes to Virginia Tech, but I can't, in good consciousness, put them higher than mediocre tier. Um, so yeah, for the Virginia schools, UVA up top, Virginia Tech down in mediocre. Wake Forest. I liked them a lot more when they had Sam Hartman. They just don't really have players that I care about. You'll see a lot of teams with players that I don't care about fall to the dislike tier. Nothing to really gravitate me towards that program. Um, let's see. Washington. Washington is going to go into the mediocre category. I like them more than some teams, dislike them more than others. I tend to root for Oregon over Washington in their matchups. Um, they've had players that I've liked in the past. Those players aren't necessarily there anymore. Um, I like Jed Fish as a coach. Hopefully, he does well in Washington. Washington State is also going to go into that mediocre tier. Again, a lot of players that I like there aren't really there anymore. Bryant, quarterback Zevi Eckhouse is over there now, so hopefully he does well. Uh, okay. I was just checking on something to see whether because I knew it wasn't I hadn't looked at them yet, and I will get to them. Um, okay, West Virginia. West Virginia is also going to occupy this mediocre tier for me. I like blue and yellow as a color combination. The Mountaineers are all right. Um, I like Garrett Green, but it's no Geno Smith, Tavon Austin days. It's no Pat White, Steve Slayton days. Um, it's not even a Will Greer day. Uh, I just don't pay attention to West Virginia nearly as much. Western Kentucky. Um, Not a huge fan of Western Kentucky. I do like that one specialty game where they did the big red helmets, where they had big red, dropping back for a pass for the quarterback and catching a pass for the wide receivers, and then offensive lineman stands for the O lineman, defensive lineman, etc. Um, but I just don't really find myself caring about Western Kentucky all that much. Their new uniforms look a lot better than their older ones did, but there are, again, more teams that I would root for in Conference USA over them. Western Michigan. Western Michigan has probably one of the biggest uniform downgrades I've ever seen. Um, so So this is what Western Michigan uniforms used to look like. They used to be black and a nice shade of gold. Um, and now they don't look like that. They look instead like this, brown and white. They just don't look good anymore. And it saddens me to see that because they had good uniforms and I liked them a lot more when they had good uniforms. They just don't have those anymore. They don't have anything that really draws me to their program anymore. Wisconsin. I found myself rooting for Wisconsin. Um, I like Luke Fickell as a coach. Badgers seem pretty fun as a mascot. Jump around, all the atmosphere that surrounds that. I'm not sold on Tyler Van Dyke as a long-term option for quarterback. I want to see them with a different quarterback, but for now, they're in the like category. And then finally, Wyoming. I very much dislike their uniforms. Um, they look like things that you would find in the bathroom. Um, both number one and number two. And for their home uniforms, they pair that with a white helmet. It is almost nightmarish for me in terms of what they do to uniforms. It's personally, I find it a little disgraceful. But you might be wondering, okay, so we reached the end of the list. We're still missing one, and that right there is Kennesaw State, the newest team to the FBS ranks. I'm not going to add in Delaware or Missouri State because they will not be in for the 2024 season, which is what we're doing for here. But Kennesaw State will be. And Kennesaw State will get a good old thumbs up in my book. I'm going to root for Kennesaw State. I like their color scheme. Um, I like that they're new. I don't know many players on the roster, but I don't really have to. They're just going to be a fun team to look out for in season number one. So I'm throwing them in the like category for now. So that will conclude the ranking section of the list. If you have any opinions, if you like where I ranked your favorite team, go ahead and drop a comment and let me know what that favorite team was. If you disliked my ranking, also feel free to drop a comment. I will try my best to respond to all of them. If you want to find out some more information about the channel, see some of the graphics that I make, etc. They're not like amazing. I'm not a graphic designer, but you can head on over to Zeke dot college football over on Instagram. That is where you can find more information on my channel. Uh, but hopefully you enjoyed. The next couple videos will be ranking the individual tiers. Um, so I'll rank these two tiers in the next video, and it should be shorter videos coming up. So it's not going to be as long as this one was. So I'm going to rank these two tiers, and then I'm going to rank the dislike tier, mediocre tier, the like tier, and then finally I'll get to the strongly like tier. So you will see my ranking from 134 all the way up to number one. So, thank you so much if you reach this point of the video for watching this long. Uh, I appreciate everything that you guys do. Um, just supporting my channel. I actually hit a really big milestone earlier today. I've reached 10 subscribers, double-digit subscribers. Um, so I'm very, very happy that people are watching, people are liking, people are commenting, and that people just seem to like the content that I post. Um, if there's any video ideas that you want me to talk about, feel free to drop those in the comment section as well, or send me a message over at Zeke.ollege on Instagram, and I'll also drop Zeke-ollege at gmail.com for any business inquiries as well. So thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have an amazing rest of your day.